Alrighty then, it's time for a Skarner game, but this one's gonna be more of a discussion video than anything. Which one? And I'm hoping you guys notice the trend I'm going for right now, thanks to Shen. His rework has encouraged me to talk about all the other champions that need a sort of Shen look. What I mean by that is that Shen didn't exactly need a rework, per se, like he wasn't in a troublesome spot, but he was constantly, in and out of balance changes because they needed to make him fair or something, bring him in line, so to speak. The thing is, his kit was too well built or too strong in its little niche thing, and there's a lot of champions like that, mostly because they've aged to the point where they no longer fit Riot's design philosophies, right? So there's a lot of old champions with kits that need tweaking, but Riot, up until Shen at least, has been very hesitant to just straight out say, you know what, fuck it, we gotta just scalp this champion, rework it from the ground up, so to speak, or at least change their direction with them. Skarner is one of them that Riot has always been a little bit too light-handed with trying to rework him. And then, I mean, they've done some really weird things, like the pillars for starters is honestly stupid still, but they've never really gone out and said, you know what, his abilities, we just got to completely replace it. We'll give him something different, something that makes him fair. They've still kept most of his power onto his Q, even though they shifted some of it to his E. They've done something with his pillars to try to make his scaling more manageable by artificially increasing his early game so he can actually jungle and then make up with the loss with items and that other kind of shit. So Skarner is just in that kind of spot. Skarner has been historically one of the most dangerous champions in the game. He does way too much damage, but if you nerf him, he does absolutely jack shit. His kit has always kind of been awful. Like in his earlier iterations, like when he was released and even some changes, he was just his Q just had straight up way too much power. You press Q on, you hit somebody with it and you attack them with a slow, you're doing a shitload of damage very quickly and they're slow to a crawl. There's nothing they can do. However, your E was completely worthless. Your W was kind of just there for a shield and eventually movement speed. I mean, it did have movement speed before, but eventually it worked a little bit different. And his ultimate was there only if someone was too out of position and you were able just to catch them. It was stronger before because mobility wasn't as crazy, but now it is, so it's even more useless. So Skarner's power was all in his Q, and the reworks have tried shifting it to one end, to the other end, and all sorts of things. Right now, his EB has become a one-point wonder, though it kind of always was, and it allows him to sort of stun anyone he hits. It's given him some form of utility, but it's kind of not enough, and you're mostly kind of just stuck making Skarner a fighter. Like, he still snowballs very, very hard, and he can still slaughter people if you manage to grab them, but so can a lot of other champions. There's nothing that unique about Skarner. Things became worse for him when Vi came out, because she kind of does the same job he tries to do, but a lot more efficient. Skarner relies on a lot of outside sources, such as items or enemies being in a bad position or amplification from his teammates or flash. Well, Vi just can use her Q and her ultimate, and there you go. You caught somebody. Like, she's self-sufficient, Skarner's not. So Skarner needs yet another rework. And if you think, oh, he's received too many, well, Soraka's number one in that. I think Skarner's number two. Or probably even KO. I don't know who's number two, Skarner or KO. Nonetheless, he desperately needs to sort of Shen rework. They just need to straight out remove his Q and give him something else. Maybe make him less sustained. And that's what the trend with my latest videos has gone to. Talking about these champions in that they're not exactly always crazy, and there are some means into putting them in line for the current meta, but all of a sudden something else changes, items get introduced or champions get nerfed, and these characters can go from 0 to 100 in an instant. Nerf their betters, nerf their predators, and they go crazy, they go haywire. There are some champions that would become better, let's say if you nerfed one of their hard counters, but they wouldn't go insanely crazy. These champions all tend to just switch nuts mode on, right? It's kind of a weird way to say it, but yeah. Like when I was talking about Nautilus the other day, I mentioned how Lee Sin and them becoming prevalent again makes Nautilus even worse than he normally would be in the jungle. I mean, lane and top lane is different. Same thing with Skarner. If everything that kind of bugs him, or at least holds him down, gets moderately brought down, he could all of a sudden become a terror again, and see he get himself nerfed once more. So he just needs a rework in which Riot can build upon for future use. Even if he comes out weak or too strong in his next one, their Riot should be looking to make a rework that is let's call it malleable. They can alter it, they can change it, and the core essence of what they want Skarner to do would be preserved. Right? Like Skarner right now, if you think about it, what does he kind of do? Like he's supposed to be this fighter guy that can grab somebody or initiate, but he doesn't really have the tools for that. It's like if they remove his Q, his damage goes to shit, so he can't even be a fighter anymore. If they buff anything about him, he can get a little too tanky and a little too powerful, and it just becomes insane. Yeah, I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm hoping you catch my drift. The only suggestion I've seen from players is that for them to sort of make Skarner into either a straight out fighter and a straight out tank. And by making him a fighter, make it so his Q is not a spammable ability, but just one big old punch of some kind. Chunk people rather than slowly melt them, because burst is technically easier to balance than sustain, which in itself is a topic that I'm going to bring up in a little bit. Some other players have asked, why not Riot just bring out more supportive qualities from him, make his Q into like a stun. I know he could stun with Z, but make it some like an ability that's more used for his utility and give him better stats elsewhere. I don't know. If you got suggestions, give them out. I'm just kind of repeating what some people have told me. Anyways, the other big issue with Skarner is part of the overlying issue with sustain in general. If you've ever noticed in League of Legends history for balances, sustained champions have always been a problem of some kind. I mean, sustained champions, especially if they have from their abilities, auto attacks and stuff. That's a different story, and those are pretty much kind of balanced most of the time. Think of champions like Cassiopeia, Swain, even Zac. Champions with sustained damage go from being insanely powerful to complete shit, because sustained damage, if you don't properly scale that shit, it can get insane. And applying that, especially for most casters, is far too easy. But the thing is, if you don't make it scale properly or give it good base values, then there's no reason to pick said champion, or for whatever reason. Like think of Cassiopeia. Whenever she's been very strong, her sustained damage was likely crazy, and the scaling of it was shit bonkers. She could hit you once and then just melt you down within seconds, right? It wasn't burst damage, but it kind of felt like burst damage, so to speak. And that's the eternal issue with sustained damage on casters. It's not as bad in other MOBAs, or I mean in Dota 2, since when I've been playing it, when I've seen some sustained casters, because that shit doesn't really scale in Dota. But in League, since there's scaling involved, it's a really difficult thing to balance. Again, think of every sustained champion you know, and whenever they've been strong, they've been a little too annoying to deal with, and Riot's brought them down in line. Hell, when the Deathfire Torch, I think that one's called, the offensive mastery that gave casters some more dot damage, Riot ended up having to nerf Swain preemptively to keep him from going crazy with that shit. So they are aware that some of the sustained champions can be a little too damn strong, but they avoid doing anything to them because they don't know exactly how to tackle them without screwing with their identity. And that again is where sort of Skarner lies. Riot, hopefully, now after the I would say success of Shen, might consider just straight up saying, fuck it. We're gonna sacrifice some of these champions, and we don't, even if it doesn't preserve their feel, it makes them a lot easier on us to balance and opens up the gateway for future decisions. I mean. So yeah, like I used to play Skarner a lot. I used to use him a lot in solo queue because he snowballed, but now his minigame shit and just his weird wonkiness of playing him has turned me off from him. This is a normal game, so the stuff you see here, kind of take it lightly, because we're kind of mostly just fucking around and we're not too serious. But still, my point stands. It was kind of odd too, wasn't it? I mean, actually not odd. it was odd for me in that fans couldn't understand why, or fans or other viewers couldn't understand why Skarner's Juggernaut rework was such a, let's call it, red herring. It didn't actually address or do anything to him. In fact, he ended up still being in the same position. Now that he's been brought down, and brought down numbers wise, he's back to his same no one's using him shape. Same thing kind of happened to all the other Juggernauts. In order to try to preserve their field, Riot kind of just decided to straight out give them power, or kind of give them some sort of bandages. And Skarner received some of the most. And as a result, because they were a little too much, they had to tune them down. And again, they kind of just suck. I mean, some of them got off better. Darius and Garen could arguably you could argue that they got off better on this. But Skarner and Mordekaiser, they, I think, got off worse on this. Skarner's whole little minigame shit is frustrating to play with and doesn't really add anything to the game, except making him weaker. I do think it's a very lazy, genius way of, subverting the issue of having too much scaling on the sustain side of things. Sorry for that weird little squeal. I have really horrible back pain right now, and I'm trying not to move as much while voicing. Anyhow, again, I personally, just like Nautilus, don't have any real suggestions as to personally give as to what they could do to Skarner. I just hope they do something. Throughout the course of this game, you could see that in the early game, I did a lot of damage, I controlled the enemy team, but then later on, I just kind of find myself being unable to do jack dick because I just can't do anything. I will get kited, I get hand blasted. If I had built myself tank, I'd just be a glorified one-button champion. Much like Nautilus and everybody else that are suffering through this, the game has evolved past the point where these champions are relevant, or where small, simpler changes could be done to make them at least useful. Some of these champions could have been fixed with different changes in past iterations of the games, past seasons, but now they just straight out need overhauls. And I do not blame Riot for that at all, and I'm not too critical in that sense, because I know Riot understands it, and I know a lot of fans do. It's just their philosophy for the game changed, and they didn't have the resources back then, or the willingness to completely screw over the remaining fans of said champions by just forcing changes upon them. So it's just a change of times. In fact, there's still certain champions that keep coming back that you guys know are kind of victims of their past. Mostly all the old champions, and one of them is in here too, Jax. You guys have seen it. The second something happens that Jax loves that makes him strong, all of a sudden he's crazy again. Jax with the Rage Blade comes back and just starts beating people up. Rage Blade gets nerfed, and Jax is kind of left in the sidelines yet again. It happens. He was designed for one of the earlier designs before Riot sort of decided what they wanted to do. I'm pretty sure Riot would never release a champion like Jax anymore if he hadn't been released back then. And think about that too, actually. It could be the question of the day. What former champions from season 0, 1, and 2 do you think Riot would not release anymore if they had never released them initially? My best bet are on champions like Skarner, probably Jax, probably Singe too, or at least in their kind of in their current forms. And also think about this: if Riot were to release them, what crap could they do to make them relevant or make them more different? Again, the only reason Riot doesn't do that right now, anyways, is because they don't want to upset people who are really dedicated to the champions and upset them, because you already saw with Shen, you already saw with Poppy that some people were very upset that their favorite champion got reworked in some way. Anyways, I know it devolved into a little bit of a rant, but those are my thoughts on Skarner. There was not really that much of a video to commentate. So either way, soon I'll be going back to ranked games, so I'll have actual real commentaries. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the commentary. This channel is supported by my sponsors, Crunchyroll and Loot Crate. Check out the description below for links to the websites. Signing up for any trials, including Crunchyroll's free anime trial, greatly supports my channel. Also remember to give the video a like to support the channel and subscribe if you haven't yet.